So as it says here, it's Revolutionary War Finance, my personal story. This is really my excuse to tell a story about me and my wife that is somewhat related to Revolutionary War Finance. So this is the upper picture, left picture, that's my wife with her mom. So her mom is Claire Canby. Moving to the right is her father, Alfred Canby. To the right is Henry P. Canby. And then the second row, on the bottom, that's William J. Canby. To the right is his mother. She was a Canby and also a Claypool. And then her mom was Betsy Ross. So Betsy Ross's grandson on the left there is William Canby, and Jane Canby is the second one. So he lived with his parents. He was born in 1825. Betsy Ross lived with them, their family, when her last few years. She passed away in 1836 when he was 11 years old. So he grew up hearing the stories from his mom and aunts and people that worked with Betsy Ross, the story about how George Washington came to her shop and how she made the flag. So he, later on in life, was interested in this. In 1870, there was a lot of interest in the centennial coming up in 1876. So there was a lot of patriotism. So he got all these people that were still living that had known Betsy Ross, collected their stories, had them all notarized, and wrote a paper. And the Historical Society of Pennsylvania in 1870 invited him to come present his paper about Betsy Ross and the story of the flag. So that presentation was picked up by the newspapers of the day, and that was kind of the point where Betsy Ross got national recognition. So I'm not in there, but I got to marry into the family. So when I met my wife, Eileen, before we got married, my birthday is June 14th, which is Flag Day. And her mom was very much into Betsy Ross, and she said I was perfect for her because I was born on Flag Day. So she passed away in 2020, and we were going through all of her stuff. And you know how families have certain people that end up being the collectors of all the family stuff? All the things kind of came through the family and ended up in her garage or in her cupboard or whatever. Her great-grandfather, William J. Canby, in 1844 drew a family tree of the Canby family that's quite intricate. So that's now on our wall. So we found this box in the garage. It was a moving box. And I opened up the top of it, and there were a bunch of family letters in it. And like, family letters from the 40s and 50s and stuff. And I pulled them out. There was a little cigar box in there. And I opened it up, coins. Thought, ooh, cool. So one of the things in that coin box was the $50 Continental Currency that I found. And there was also a shoebox down in there that said contents of Gardner's safe deposit box. And Gardner was a city in Maine. So I opened it up. There's various papers, wills and stuff. And there's a piece of paper all wrapped up. And it says, Diary of John Claypool to be preserved with great care. So being preserved with great care meant it got put in a moving box in her garage. So we thought, John Claypool, who is John Claypool? It sounds familiar. Well, Betsy Ross started out as Elizabeth something. Anyway, her family was from the Philadelphia area, and I should know that name. But anyway, she married John Ross, and something happened to him, and he died in, we believe, February of 1776, which was during the war years. She remarried Joseph Ashburn. Joseph Ashburn was a privateer during the war, was captured by the British and sent to Mill Prison in England. And John Claypool was also a privateer and was captured and wrote this diary up in the left, which recounts him leaving Philadelphia, being captured by the British. They landed them in Ireland, or marched across Ireland into Britain, and was put in Mill Prison. One of the pages in here, he came to know Joseph Ashburn, Betsy Ross's husband, and he recounts him getting sick and passing away. So then later on in there, it talks about him being released in an exchange and coming back to Philadelphia, after which he went out again as a privateer, but was not captured again. But after the war, he would have been the one that brought the news of Joseph Ashburn's death to Betsy Ross. And a couple years later, after the war, they got married. And so she became Elizabeth Claypool. So if you see Elizabeth Claypool, Betsy Ross, that's the same thing. So we found this diary in the box. So we started reaching out a little bit. We eventually talked to the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia, and they were very interested in it. We sent them pictures, and they said, we would love to have you donate this. We would treasure that as a donation. And they, from another part of the family, have John Claypool's sea chest in one of their displays. So we made a plan to donate that. So we also have a lot of the papers from William J. Canby, and one of them I was reading one night, and it talks about the family Bible. He says there are two Bibles. The one in my possession is old, and the front's torn off, and it starts at Genesis 25. Well, we had this other Bible that had been wrapped up in newspaper and just this falling apart thing that we had tucked away, didn't know what it was. And I thought, well, that Bible that we have, like the front is torn off of it. So I went and pulled it out. It starts at Genesis 25. And he says on a certain page, it says property of Elizabeth Claypool. And another page, it says, all the family recordings. So there's a picture on the right of this Bible. That page is written in the hand, part of it in John Claypool's hand, and the other, I believe, in Betsy Ross's, recording the birth of their children. And there are other pages that record other family members as well. In the back, it says Elizabeth Claypool and John Claypool married, whatever the year was, in the 8th year of the independence of our country. On one of the pages, it has births of cousins, and one of them says the child was born midnight or something on the last day of the war, of a long and terrible war with Britain. So fascinating stuff. So anyway, we donated both of these items to the Museum of the American Revolution, and they said, we put out press releases when we get donations. We may get, a New York Times article, reporter may come and interview or something, and we may get a little publicity for it. So they called us and said, CBS News picked it up and wants to come do a story on you when you come. So on Sunday morning, July 5th or 6th, whatever it was, July 4th weekend, they ran a 5-minute story on CBS News on us and our donation. So there's me on the left, and that's a screenshot. So if you go to YouTube and search for John Claypool Diary, did I say CBS News? You can find this video, and you can watch, not me, but my wife mostly, talking about it. So that's how it ended up in Philadelphia. So now it's on display at the museum. So a little bit about the museum. The museum started a few years ago. There was a minister 100 years ago or so, had collected a lot of Revolutionary War stuff. And he ended up with George Washington's war tent. And this is a tent that he would put up, on the field that he worked out of as an office. So they have that on display in the museum today. And this museum acquired all of his stuff. They had land in Valley Forge. They made a trade with the National Park Service to get a lot in Philadelphia for the space in Valley Forge, and now they have the space in Philadelphia. It's a wonderful museum if you ever get a chance to go. So this is the Continental Currency $50 that I found in the box. I had it certified. The Continental Currency was printed to finance partly the Revolutionary War, to raise money, because the Continental Congress had no money. They had no money to pay troops. They had no money to buy supplies. They were fighting a well-financed and well-stocked army, Britain. So they issued Continental Currency and made laws that it had to be accepted, at face value. Of course, over time it depreciated to where it was not worth much. On it says that you can exchange it for silver, but that never was honored. All of these are hand numbered. So there's a serial number up there on the top, and they are all hand signed. The small currents, the small notes, like $50, 2/3, only have one signature. The larger ones have two signatures, One signature is in red and one's in black. One of the interesting things about the signatures is in this reference book, you can find a list of all the signatures. There are a handful of the people that signed the Continental Currency who were also signers of the Declaration of Independence. So if you can find a Continental Currency note that's signed by one of those are prizes. So they're kind of cool because, not just their printed money, but this personal connection where they're hand-signed and hand-numbered. Unfortunately, they wrote them in red and black. Red ink does not usually survive very well. So many of them, the red ink is illegible or completely faded out. So you'll find some with only the black signature and the red one is faded off of it. So this one is not Continental Currency, even though it says Continental Currency. And I'm sure, are people familiar with the history of this coin? It was probably made either in Germany or England as a souvenir. So they are collected here as Continental Currency being the first dollar and all that, but that is not true. And there's a lot of recent story and articles about this. They are still very expensive and very popular, but they are not currency, they are not Continental Currency, and they were not issued by our government. So here's another one. You can see where this one, the red signature has faded off of it, and the serial number was in red as well. A lot of the things on them were for counterfeiting, anti-counterfeiting. Some of the patterns on the larger ones have like a leaf pattern that was supposedly hard to reproduce. So they also have mica flecks in them in the paper, so you can look at the paper. They were also widely counterfeited. There are contemporary counterfeits which are collectible as well. The British government attempted to print and insert them into circulation to debase them as part of the war effort. And they actually would print sheets for vendors, people with stores, that have like pictures of the real ones. So they have a reference sheet so they could tell if they were counterfeit or not. And those you can find collectible still today too. Why did we need all this money and what was going on? So that's a really hard to see picture. It's in that book. The British Army was way more powerful than the American ragtag forces. Washington, his main strategy was to avoid direct confrontation with the British at all cost. So they did a lot of running away or hiding or they did not want to confront him in battles because they would lose. So that, a lot of what was going on was we were trying to entice France to come and join us. So we had to present a good picture to France, like we knew what we were doing. We're on top of things. We're in good shape. We wanted a big bailout from France. So this is a picture that was painted of the American Army, and you can look at the picture in the book, but there's detail all along across the river there of all the companies laid out, and you can see Washington's tent is in this picture. But this was all done and laid out for the French whoever's to come and see that they were organized and had a plan and come join us. We're a good investment. So a lot of the financing was done through loans. These are from Connecticut. The state of Connecticut every state had their own troops. So Connecticut had the Connecticut Line, was part of the Continental Army, and each state would be responsible for paying their troops. One of the ways they paid the Connecticut troops was through these vouchers, and they would issue one. This was issued to a Thomas Brooks, who would have been a Civil or a Revolutionary War veteran, served in the Continental Army in Connecticut, and they issued them this for a certain amount. The amount is up in the corner there. Let's say 6 pounds, whatever. Pounds. Some pounds, some pence. And then each year it says how many years there, they would pay 6% interest. So they could pay off the soldiers for the time they had served. So every year when they went to collect interest, they would bring their note and the treasurer would sign on the back, interest paid on this date. So this shows each of the years when the interest was paid to Thomas Brooks. And almost all of them are signed by the person they're issued to. So lower left, sideways, you see Thomas Brooks. So that's the signature of a Revolutionary War soldier who served. These are pay orders. Most of these paper records were destroyed after the war. They didn't really have much reason to keep them. For some reason, the state of Connecticut, they're much more available. But some states, they're almost nothing available. So there's a lot of paper artifacts from Connecticut that you can still find today. So this is a pay order issued to, I can't read it from here, but issued by the pay committee for Connecticut to pay for some expenses, and it's signed by the treasurer down there, and it's countersigned on there by Oliver Wolcott, the big scribble across the top. So the committee would sign it, and then he's like a second checkoff person for those. Oliver Wolcott Jr. his father was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he served as Connecticut governor. So there's a signature of a significant person from the 18th century. And then the back would have signatures of people as they dispersed funds or whatever. So these are kind of cool because there's a lot of personal connection and handwriting of people from that era. This one on the bottom is signed by Oliver Ellsworth, OLV. He represented Connecticut at the Constitutional Convention of 1787. As you know, we have 2 senators from each state. He was one of the first 2 senators from Connecticut. And in 1796, George Washington nominated him as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I forgot to put that in there, of the United States. So he was appointed by George Washington. And at the bottom, John Adams later described Ellsworth as the firmest pillar of the federal government during its earliest years. So there's his signature on one of these pay things. So these are kind of cool because you can read, who they were issued to. Some of them say what they were for, and you see these interesting signatures of people on them. And it's history of the financing of our revolution. So this is another one of those. Is that a? This is not one of the military ones. I can't read it. Anyway, another similar thing by the state of Connecticut. So if you want to know about Continental Currency or colonial money, the book on the right is the one I have. There's up here by David Bowers, Continental Currency and Coins. The coins are not Continental Currency. They're not coins. They're really medals or souvenirs. That paper piece in the middle is a $20 note. It's different from all the rest of the issues. That was actually printed on paper that Benjamin Franklin acquired in France, those are expensive. They're hard to find. I have seen one for sale at one time. It was tens of thousands of dollars, I believe. So it's a really cool piece. It's very different from all the rest of the pieces. The one on the left is the one by Eric Newman, yes. That one, I believe, is in print, and you can also get it online in digital format. In addition to the Continental Currency, the states and the federal government issued a lot of bonds and various financial instruments to raise money for the war. There's a book called The Price of Liberty, The Public Debt of the American Revolution. There's a copy of it up there on the desk. You can find it. What does it say over there, $96? Yeah, I don't think I paid that much for mine. This was the only copy I could find today. But this has a lot of story in it. I have attempted to read through it and understand it. If you're not a financial person like Jeffrey, it may be hard to understand. But it talks a lot about the details of why certain things were done and how it was done and how the debt was handled and Hamilton and how he wanted to acquire the debt of the states and all that magic money stuff. So it's interesting to me, but I haven't been interested enough to really read it closely and really understand it well. But you will, all of the items in there are numbered by Anderson numbers. So if you find stuff online or in auctions, they'll usually list them by the Anderson numbers, and this is the reference for that. And that's my last slide.